The story begins in a courtroom filled with anticipation. The clock ticks loudly as the atmosphere buzzes with tension. Judge Evelyn Carter takes her seat behind the bench, her robe flowing gracefully. Her gaze sweeps over the courtroom, commanding respect without a word. She has been through years of rigorous work to get here, from her humble beginnings in a rough neighborhood to earning the prestigious position she now holds. At 48, she has proven herself not only as a judge, but as a force to be reckoned with. The case at hand is a minor civil dispute over a contract breach. As Evelyn listens intently to both parties, her demeanor is calm but firm. She interjects when necessary, asking pointed questions and ensuring that each party has been given a fair chance to present their side. Her decisions are clear and direct, with no room for argument. As the case concludes, she orders a fair settlement, one that reflects the principles of justice and equality she upholds. As the morning session progresses, Evelyn's mind remains focused, and her professionalism never wavers. Her reputation for fairness has made her courtroom one of the most respected in the city. Cases come and go, but Evelyn handles each one with the same level of care and dedication. Suddenly, her clerk walks up with the file for the next case. Evelyn glances at the name on the folder, David Davy Collins. Her fingers pause, hovering over the case file, and for a brief moment, her eyes cloud with recognition. The name takes her back to her childhood, memories of a turbulent time in her life, a time when she had to fight for everything she had. Davy Collins wasn't just another name on a file, he was a part of her past, a person who had once meant something to her. She sets the file down for a moment, her mind racing with thoughts she hasn't allowed herself to revisit in years. The courtroom, oblivious to her inner turmoil, continues with its routine. The clerk notices Evelyn's pause and gently asks, "Your Honor, do you need a moment?" Evelyn clears her throat and adjusts herself in her chair, forcing the past back where it belongs. She nods, regaining her composure. "No. Proceed with the next case," she replies, though a subtle tension lingers in the air as she glances once more at the name on the file. As the next case is called, Evelyn's focus sharpens again, but the memory of David Davy Collins looms over her, reminding her that some pasts are never truly left behind. She pushes it to the back of her mind, knowing she must now face the person who, in some ways, represents both the hurt of her past and the hope for her future. The question now is, what happens when the past and present collide in the pursuit of justice? The courtroom is filled with the usual buzz of activity, but as the next defendant is called to the stand, the air seems to shift. The doors open, and a middle-aged man is escorted into the courtroom by a bailiff. His clothes are worn, his movements sluggish. His face, once youthful and full of energy, now carries the weight of years and struggle. This is David Collins. Evelyn's eyes narrow as she sees him, and a jolt runs through her body. She's prepared for any case, any name, any issue, but not this, not him. David's tired eyes scan the room, his gaze lingering on the judge's bench. And then, for a split second, their eyes meet. Time seems to freeze. Recognition strikes like lightning. David's expression shifts from confusion to disbelief. He mouths a single word. "Eve?" Evelyn feels a lump in her throat. It's as if the years melt away, and she's back in that small, struggling neighborhood where she and David were inseparable as children. She remembers their laughter, their late-night talks, and the dreams they once shared, dreams that never came true for him, but she managed to escape from. Evelyn forces herself to breathe, to stand tall. She quickly refocuses on her role as judge, but her heart races. Her pulse quickens. The years between them feel like a chasm she didn't realize was so vast and yet so narrow at the same time. Taking a moment to collect herself, Evelyn's voice is steady as she speaks, her tone formal. "Mr. Collins, you are charged with theft and destruction of property. How do you plead?" David blinks, his eyes still locked on hers. He seems frozen in disbelief. For a long moment, he says nothing. The courtroom waits, and Evelyn's heartbeat grows louder in her ears. She's used to the pressure, but this is different. Finally, David clears his throat and responds, his voice rough but sincere, "Not guilty, Your Honor." Evelyn nods, though she can feel the weight of his words hanging in the air. "You may be seated," she directs, and David takes a seat in the defendant's chair. The bailiff moves to place the case file in front of her, but Evelyn's eyes stay fixed on David for a moment longer than is necessary. She can see the faint traces of the boy she once knew, the same smile, the same quiet strength, but it's been tempered by something darker, something that has shaped him into the man sitting before her today. As the proceedings continue, Evelyn tries to refocus, but her mind races. What happened to him? Why was he here, in this courtroom, standing accused of crimes? And why did his life turn out so differently from hers? David Collins had been her best friend. They'd been inseparable back then, and now, years later, he's here, a defendant, facing charges. The truth stings in ways she's not prepared for. She catches herself staring at him, her emotions stirring beneath the surface. The courtroom hums with activity, but for Evelyn, everything feels distant. She can hear the murmur of the lawyer speaking, the shuffle of papers, the faint coughs of the audience, but all she can focus on is the man before her. The boy she used to know, sitting there, now a stranger in more ways than one. What she doesn't know, as the trial begins, is that David is struggling just as much to navigate this moment. He has his own fears, of what has become of his life, of how Evelyn must see him now as he stares across the courtroom at the person who once meant everything to him. His guilt is buried in layers of regret, but it doesn't change the fact that he can't undo the past. Evelyn's hands rest lightly on the gavel, her grip tightening slightly as the reality of the situation hits her. This trial, these charges, this is her world now. But what about David? What about the friend she used to know? The courtroom falls into a tense silence as the prosecution begins to present its case. The store owner, a middle-aged man with a stern face, steps up to the witness stand, his eyes flickering toward David, who sits slumped in the defendant's chair. The prosecutor, a young, sharp lawyer with a commanding voice, addresses the witness. "Mr. Harris, please tell the court what happened the night the defendant allegedly broke into your store." The store owner clears his throat and begins, "I was notified that the store alarm had gone off in the middle of the night. When I arrived, I found the back door was forced open. Some food, toiletries, and supplies were missing. There was damage to the interior as well, broken windows, a shelf knocked over. I reviewed the security footage, and the man in question, David Collins, was clearly seen in the video breaking into my store." The prosecutor leans forward. "And were there any signs of forced entry?" "Yes," Mr. Harris responds. "The door was clearly kicked in." It wasn't subtle. He came in with the intent to steal. Evelyn takes it all in, her eyes focused, but her mind begins to drift. She watches David, his shoulders hunched, his head low, hearing every accusation, yet not speaking a word in his defense. She feels her stomach tighten, but she remains composed. The prosecutor then turns to the defense. "Your witness." The defense attorney, a middle-aged woman with a calm but firm voice, stands up and begins to question the store owner. "Mr. Harris, I understand your frustration, but did you ever consider the circumstances surrounding Mr. Collins' actions?" Mr. Harris raises an eyebrow. "I don't care about circumstances. He stole from me." The defense attorney nods. "Understood. But do you know that Mr. Collins is homeless? Do you know that his family has been struggling to survive?" The defense attorney gestures to the social worker sitting in the witness box, who stands up and begins to speak. The social worker, a middle-aged woman with glasses, addresses the court. "I've been working with Mr. Collins for several months. His situation is tragic. After losing his job and home, he has been trying to find stable work. He has children to feed, and his circumstances have left him in desperate need of assistance. The break-in was not an act of malice. It was an act of survival." Evelyn listens carefully, her thoughts swirling. She glances at David, whose eyes are now closed, a look of deep shame on his face. The social worker continues, "David Collins has never been a criminal. He is a father, a son, trying to do whatever it takes to care for his family in a system that has failed him." As the social worker finishes, The courtroom is still. Evelyn takes in every word. The man she had once known as her best friend, the ambitious boy with dreams of becoming a musician, someone who had always hoped to escape his environment, has now found himself in this desperate situation. She remembers how they used to stay up late, talking about their futures, how he had promised to take her to see one of his gigs one day. And now, this. David's life had spiraled in ways that were impossible to foresee when they were children. He had been her protector, her confidant, someone who had bright eyes and a heart full of dreams. But the city's systems, the economic pressures, had crushed him, piece by piece. Evelyn shifts in her seat. Her gaze lingers on the witness stand, her thoughts racing. This wasn't the David she knew, the boy who had once been so full of hope. But this was a man worn down by circumstances beyond his control, someone who had fallen victim to a system that never gave him the chance to rise. The defense attorney, sensing Evelyn's struggle, adds, "David isn't a criminal. He is a product of his environment, and all he was trying to do was ensure his family survived." Evelyn leans back in her chair, taking a deep breath. The air feels thick, and the weight of the case presses down on her. She recalls their shared memories, how they would meet after school, how he had helped her when no one else did. She remembers his laugh, his warmth, and the dreams they once shared. And now, as the case unfolds, she's confronted with a choice: the law or the boy she once knew. The line between right and wrong blurs as she considers how life shaped them differently. Was this crime inevitable, given his circumstances? Was there another way out for him? As the session adjourns for the day, Evelyn remains seated. Her mind is swirling. This isn't just about justice. It's about a lifetime of memories and an impossible decision she now must face. As the courtroom empties for a short recess, Evelyn stands up and walks to her chambers. Her mind races with everything she's heard. The case, the memories, the connection. It all feels too personal, too tangled. She can't let go of the feelings that are creeping up on her, and she knows she needs to speak with David. She needs answers. Evelyn walks into her private office and gestures for David to enter. His face remains unreadable as he steps inside, his shoulders slumped, his hands clasped in front of him. "Sit down, David," Evelyn says, her voice calm but tinged with emotion. She sits behind her desk, trying to keep a professional distance, but it's difficult. Her old friend, her old confidant, was sitting right there, the same man who used to dream alongside her. David hesitates before sitting down. "What is this about, Your Honor?" "Cut the formality, David. I know you. You're not just a name on a case file. I'm asking you, what happened to you?" Evelyn's words come out more urgent than she intends, as the weight of her concern begins to show. David looks down at his hands. "Life happened, Eve. Not all of us got a second chance like you did. I tried to make it work, but every door I knocked on stayed shut. I did everything I could, but nothing ever came through. Eventually, I ended up losing my job, then my home. And, well, I just couldn't get out." Evelyn's heart aches at the sound of his voice, so familiar yet broken. Her fingers clutch the edge of her desk, trying to keep her composure. But her mind flashes back to their shared past, the childhood laughter, their hopes, the future they dreamed of together. "You were always so full of potential, David. You had the whole world at your feet," Evelyn says softly, her voice shaking with the weight of memories. "What happened to that dream?" David looks up, eyes darkened with pain. "I don't know. I think I gave up on it somewhere along the way. I had a family to take care of, and I couldn't make it happen. You wouldn't understand. You had your way out. I didn't." Evelyn feels a pang of guilt. She had left the neighborhood, taken opportunities, while David had been left behind, left to struggle. She knew the importance of hard work, but she had been given the chance to succeed in ways he hadn't. "David, you know what you did was wrong. I can't overlook that," she says, her tone firm, the judge in her rising again. "Breaking into a store and stealing? You can't justify that." David's voice is raw, strained. "I didn't do it for myself, Eve. I did it for my kids. They were hungry, they were cold. I had no other choice. What was I supposed to do? Watch them suffer? Evelyn is silent for a long moment, absorbing his words. She looks into his eyes, and for the first time, she sees not the reckless, desperate man, but the father who would do anything to protect his children. A father who had been pushed to the edge. The same father she once knew, who had promised to help her through everything, even when things seemed impossible. Her voice softens, but she still must hold on to her sense of justice. I understand, David. I do. But I can't let personal emotions cloud my judgment. I can't ignore the law. You broke the law. You can't expect me to look the other way. David nods slowly, as if he's been prepared for this response. I get it. I didn't expect sympathy, but I had to try. For them. I'll do what I can to be fair, Evelyn says quietly, her eyes never leaving his. I won't let you suffer more than you already have. But this doesn't just affect you. There are consequences. I can't ignore that. David swallows hard, looking defeated but grateful. I know. And I'm sorry for what I've done. Evelyn sighs deeply, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on her shoulders. You're not beyond redemption, David, but you need to take responsibility for your actions no matter what. And for your sake, and your kids, you need to find a way to get back up. As she speaks, Evelyn realizes that this isn't just about the law anymore. It's about a man who had once stood by her and now needed help to stand again. She had to balance justice with compassion. There was no simple answer, but there had to be a way forward. The courtroom is quiet as the closing arguments unfold. The prosecutor stands, his tone firm and unyielding. Your Honor, Mr. Collins is no stranger to the law. His actions are not only a violation of trust, but an ongoing pattern of behavior. He's been given chances before, and yet he continues to make decisions that harm others. The severity of his crime cannot be overlooked. We ask for the maximum sentence. David's defense attorney rises next, a more compassionate tone in her voice. Your Honor, yes, Mr. Collins has made mistakes, but these mistakes come from a place of desperation. He is not a hardened criminal, but a man who was pushed to his limits by circumstances beyond his control. He's a father, trying to provide for his children in a world that has continuously shut doors in his face. We ask that you consider the context of his actions and offer him a path to rehabilitation, not just punishment. The room falls silent as Judge Evelyn Carter reflects on the arguments. She adjusts her glasses, leaning forward, her fingers tracing the edge of the gavel. This case was never just about the law, it was about the man in front of her. A man who, despite his criminal actions, had a heart that was still searching for redemption. A man who had once been her childhood friend, but had lost his way. Taking a deep breath, Evelyn rises, her voice steady as she addresses the court. Mr. Collins, the law is clear, and your actions have consequences. You broke the law, and that cannot be ignored. The damage you caused cannot be undone, and I will not minimize the importance of holding you accountable for your actions. There's a brief pause as Evelyn locks eyes with David. His hands are clasped in front of him, his head slightly bowed in shame, but his gaze is full of hope. But justice is not only about punishment, it is also about understanding, she continues, her voice growing stronger. It is about recognizing when someone is at a crossroads, when they can be given the chance to rebuild, to learn from their mistakes, and to make things right. David lifts his head slightly, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. I sentence you to community service, Evelyn declares, her voice resolute. You will work at the local food bank, where you will assist in providing food for those in need. I want you to give back to the community that you've taken from. You will also be required to attend counseling sessions and participate in job placement assistance programs. These programs will help you regain the skills you need to provide for your family in a way that is lawful and sustainable. David's heart swells with gratitude, but he remains still. His eyes are wet as he looks up at Evelyn. Thank you, Eve. I mean, Your Honor, he says, his voice thick with emotion. Evelyn nods, her expression softening, but her authority still intact. "You've been given a second chance, David. Don't waste it. And remember, you're not alone in this. You have support, and you can choose to rise above this. You're still capable of making a difference, both for yourself and for your family." David nods, tears welling up in his eyes. "I won't forget this, Your Honor." "Thank you." Evelyn gives him a final, knowing look before returning to her seat, her gavel coming down with a firm, decisive thud. Court is adjourned. The room empties, leaving David alone in the quiet after the storm. As he walks out of the courtroom, he feels the weight of the second chance he's been given, and for the first time in years, he feels a spark of hope for the future. Weeks passed, and the change in David's life was undeniable. The once despondent man, who had been on the edge of losing everything, was now finding his footing. He spent his days working diligently at the local food bank, helping pack meals, distributing food to families in need, and even mentoring others who found themselves in similar situations. David was slowly rebuilding his sense of self-worth and reconnecting with the community he had once felt so disconnected from. It wasn't easy, but David was determined. Each day, he woke up with a renewed sense of purpose, driven by the chance Evelyn had given him. He had even found a steady job at a local warehouse, working nights to support his children. Though the hours were long and the pay wasn't much, David felt a deep sense of pride in providing for his family once again. His kids, who had been accustomed to days of uncertainty, now had something to look forward to, a stable home with food on the table. One afternoon, after finishing a long shift at the warehouse, David walked to the food bank to continue his volunteer work. His children were with him, laughing as they playfully ran ahead. For the first time in years, David felt like he was getting his life back. Meanwhile, Evelyn, ever so vigilant in her pursuit of justice, decided to see how her decision had impacted David's life. She arrived at the food bank on a quiet afternoon, not wanting to draw attention to herself. She quietly observed from the corner, her eyes taking in the scene. She saw David standing behind a table, handing out food with a warm smile, laughing as he interacted with a young family. His children were by his side, their faces lit up with joy as they helped their father. Evelyn's heart swelled as she watched them, knowing the hardship they had endured and seeing the bond they now shared. The transformation was remarkable. David was no longer the man who had come into her courtroom, defeated and ashamed. He was now a father who had regained his dignity and his place in the world. His kids were smiling, their lives steadied by the love and support of their father, who had fought through his past to create a better future. Evelyn smiled softly to herself, unseen by David. She walked out of the food bank quietly, feeling a deep sense of satisfaction in her heart. She knew she had made the right decision when she gave David the chance to redeem himself. It was moments like this that reminded her why she had chosen the path of justice, to not only uphold the law, but to recognize the humanity in each person and give them the opportunity to rise above their past. David's journey was far from over, but for the first time in a long while, he was walking it with his head held high, the love of his children at his side, and the support of a community that believed in him. And as Evelyn walked away, she knew that she had given him more than just a second chance. She had given him hope. As Evelyn quietly exits the food bank, her heart feels lighter than it has in a long time. She pauses at the door, looking back at David as he helps a family carry bags of food to their car, his children laughing beside him. The change in him was evident. The weight of years of struggle was being lifted, not by the law, but by the simple act of compassion and understanding. Evelyn reflects on the case as she walks down the street, her voice narrating softly. Sometimes justice isn't about the letter of the law, it's about giving people the chance to rewrite their story, because every life is worth saving. The camera pans over the city, capturing glimpses of people going about their lives, some struggling, others succeeding. The image of David and his children fades in the background, symbolizing the hope that lives within second chances.